Welcome back, everybody, to the Omniverse Comics Guide podcast. We are your Omniverse Comics Guide guys. I am Eric. That's my pal Dave. Dave, how are you?
Backstreet's back. All right.
I love never knowing what you're gonna say when we start this. It's the best.
I never know what I'm gonna say.
I love it. Everybody who's been hanging out with us on the Twitch, seeing us prepare and go through all the kinks of technical difficulties, we appreciate it. BC Scrubs, Yansum, Marvel Man, Omega Bread, of course. Who else is here that I'm forgetting? Is that everybody for now? My mom, possibly. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out with us. And, of course, if you're watching on YouTube, watching Dave's wonderfully edited videos, so professionally done, hit that thumbs up and that subscribe button. Bing. And then if you're on your phone listening to Spotify or Apple, iPod, iTunes, whatever they call it, subscribe there too. And give us a comment. If there's something that you like about the show or something that you disagree with, feel free to comment. Let us know what you're thinking. And of course, Omniverse Comics Guide for the reading orders, all the podcasts, creator interviews, collector item specials, your one-stop shop for everything to help you along your way reading comics.
Woohoo!
Dave.
Hello.
Are you excited to talk about Spider-Man this week?
My spider sense is indeed tingling. I've had to open my flies.
This is a pretty fun topic to go into for guys that I think have read as much Spider-Man as we have.
Yeah.
This is a pretty... When you mentioned it to me, I was like, was it this topic? Might have been this topic. No, it was the battles. Yeah. The fight scenes, those come to me pretty easy because every comic book has a fight scene. But when you mentioned, I think, Spider-Man in the 80s, quickly, there were so many books I was excited to reread.
There's a lot to choose from, isn't there? There's so much to choose from. And even though, even though I grew up in the 80s, it was hard for me to access American comics. I just got reprints for the most part. And for you, I mean, you probably started when did you start reading Spider-Man?
It was like
90s?
bits and bytes. It would have been the 90s because I couldn't read in the 80s. It was just looking at the pictures.
But despite that, we both ended up really loving 80s Spider-Man. So as soon as that topic came up, we were both really like, what are we going to do? Yeah. What are we going to include this time around? Like, this is just such a great era to go back to.
Yeah, it really is. Where do you think it ranks amongst the decades of Spider-Man stories? Because now we're at how many? I'm not sure. 60 years now?
Must be.
Of Spider-Man?
Yeah,
close to
62, 63 years.
The character's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
Thousands of comics and spin-offs and movies and cartoons, you name it. Where does this lie amongst that, the whole tapestry of Spider-Man stories for you?
It's funny because when you think about that at the time, you think like Spider-Man had been around a long time by the 80s. And it's like, in the grand scheme of things now, it's, there's been so much since, like way more.
Right.
But somehow I think the 80s is a really character-defining decade for Spider-Man. There's some really big events, really big changes to the character. He left the decade a very, very different Spider-Man to the one we had at the beginning. And I think that in terms of character progression, which is what storytelling should be about, it was just such a strong era for Spider-Man. Like it's a defining 10 years, and I think like there are some big moments in other decades, and obviously like 60s is pretty key or he wouldn't exist. And we had the Civil War era and everything, but that has its ups and downs too. But the 80s, for some reason, like even if you read not a great Spider-Man comic, there's something still really fun about it.
I think you nailed it on the head. Even if it feels a little hokey Saturday morning cartoonish, it feels right.
Yeah.
There's something about it that
it's got enough cheese, the right amount of cheese, I
didn't know I was so popular.
Even when they introduced a new look for the character in the 80s, that's still Spider-Man. It still works. It
did. It really did. And I remember as a kid, I just figured Spider-Man wore two different suits. I didn't think anything of it. I completely recognized Spider-Man in the black suit, Spider-Man in the red and blue suit. I was okay with it. I didn't mind him having two.
Me either. Not options. At all. And I love both. It's really hard for me to choose. Probably like the black one more. But it's hard because it's one's
It
a
really
classic,
is.
but the other one is also just so freaking cool. You normally theme your choices. This is my question for you, right? You normally
Yes.
theme your choices. Did you theme your choices tonight?
I did. I themed it in a way, not so much as far as like theme, more of I chose 5 different creators
Right. I don't normally
and
do a
talk.
theme, but I've done a theme this time.
Okay, what's your theme?
It's not alphabetical.
It's biographical.
It's autobiographical.
No way.
Autobiographical.
I've gone high fidelity on your ass. You're right. You're having a moment.
I got a half chub. Yeah.
In England, we call it half a tea cake.
I love a good high fidelity reference. That's great.
So, my first choice of 5 Spider-Man stories that really defined my life as a reader, as well as just recommendations. It's so hard to be subjective sometimes. Sometimes people expect certain stories or events on a list. I'm going to do the stuff that really, really hit me. It's funny, I was just looking at in the comments, Omega Bread said there was a Darkness to Spider-Man title throughout the 80s that just wasn't there prior, apart from maybe the Gweth of Den Spacey, the death of Kevin Spacey, and then goes on to list a few, some of which may come up, so I'm not going to go into those. But my first choice tonight, it's Amazing Spider-Man 316.
I could see that. No, that's okay.
What an incredible
That came out
cover.
in the 80s.
That was
For some reason,
1989.
fantastic.
Now-
Yeah, I reminded myself of how far into the 80s McFarlane was on the book, because you always associate him with 90s.
Yeah, because
art,
especially
right?
when
Art
they
of the
launched
90s.
the Spider-Man solo, just Spider-Man title, 1990.
Right.
And then, of course, he was big because
Right.
of Spawn. So, yeah, a lot of
Right.
people do, and rightly so, associate him with the 90s. But, yeah,
Yeah.
So this one, when I was 12 years old, some relatives came to stay with my parents, and they gave me a little bit of cash. Go buy yourself something nice. And I got a tenner, and I walked into this news agent, and I looked down at the comics at the bottom. The only regular comics I was buying at that point, I think, were Marvel UK's Transformers, Death's Head, Dragon's Claws. It's like all Marvel UK stuff. I didn't have access to American comics. I knew they were originally in America, printed in America, and then we sometimes had versions of them printed in the UK. This was the first time I saw an American comic book. It was the right size. They looked tiny compared to the Marvel UK ones. The Marvel UK ones are huge, magazine size. But this was the first cover as well. Now, I recognized that costume from the Secret Wars series that was reprinted by Marvel UK. But it was the black costume with teeth. What is that? I have to have it. And of course, Spider-Man just looks bollocksed on the front. Like he's on his back. There's what appears to be blood coming out of or all over Venom's hand. He's not got fangs as such yet, has he? Did he have? No, that's when the teeth started to get pointier. This thing looks scary. And even the first page when you open it, it's Venom chasing some dude in the sewer, and the title's Dead Meat. Like, that's just perfect for a 12-year-old kid going like, what is this? And I'm getting into my dark zone as a child. I was massively into just twisted, weird, dark things, but I could never really find stuff that resonated with me. This was perfect. It was the first American comic I found. I bought all the other 19 titles. They were 50p each. I bought 20 comics, that being the one that drew me into it. This is the comic that started my obsession. This is where it truly began. Cool. It's by David Michelinie, Todd McFarlane, and colored by Bob Sharon. It came out in 1989. Now, Venom escapes the vault in Amazing Spider-Man 315, so you can read that one first, but this is really a two-parter from issue 316 and 317. It's Venom's return. So he'd made his debut in 300. This is round 2. That's quite a wait for round 2. That's over a year between those stories. So
He was terrifying.
he was absolutely terrifying, and I loved it. And that art was incredible. Like McFarlane's art was just insane, and it was nothing like I'd ever seen in any of the comics I'd read. And then Black Cat turns up in the first part, and that blew, well, my mind among other things. It was amazing. I just thought she was incredibly cool and just immediately fascinated with that character. And she gets a rough ride in that story. She's not even in it for long, and it's not pleasant. It's a great story. It's incredibly dark. You get a cameo from the Thing, who was going through his pineapple phase. This guy knows who Peter Parker is. He knows Peter Parker and Spider-Man are one and the same because he's got that black costume, the symbiote costume from the Secret Wars, that they share that knowledge. I didn't 100% know what was going on. This is back in the time when they weren't relaunching number ones all the time. I had to figure out what was going on. They gave you a little bit of recap in the story, and then we're into it, and it's just so much fun. And like I say, that sold me on comics. So Amazing Spider-Man 316, 317, jump back in time, read those stories. They are fun. They're not necessarily the quickest read sometimes. They can be a little verbose, but I think David Michelinie hits the right amount of dialogue in those books.
Nice pick, Dave. All right. I'm going to do something somewhat autobiographical as well.
Ooh.
I'm going to try to do mine chronologically. The first one I'm picking is a Amazing Spider-Man issue 224, Let Aged Wings Fly. It's a Vulture story. Roger Stern, John Romita Jr., and I had read this issue so many times as a kid because it was reprinted in a Spider-Man magazine that I had bought at a bookstore. And the reason I picked the magazine was because it had a lot more page count. It seemed to have like a bunch of different stories from different eras. Some were drawn by Steve Ditko. I didn't realize who any of these people really were, but I felt like, okay, I'm getting a little bit of Spider-Man from a bunch of different times, which was really cool.
That's
but
nice.
it included the Fool Killer story, as well as the next issue, which was the Vulture one in 224. And I didn't realize that those magazines were collecting 2 issues at a time of the Roger Stern run, reprinting them, and then adding some other things to it. But this was the one that I had. I read it a bunch. I don't know why I enjoyed that art the way that I did. I felt like it was definitive classic Spider-Man. Like it was of a in-between era of the old and what would go on to be like that McFarlane stuff. But I had a preference for this for some reason. And I really enjoyed, as hokey as it was in some points. So the premise of the story is Aunt May, and she's at a nursing home for old age folks. And Nathan Lubinsky is introduced. I don't know if he's introduced in this issue, but he's in the issue. And one of the people that is in the old age home with him is Adrian Toomes, who is the Vulture.
Right.
And he finds some cockamamie way to piece together some tech that's been destroyed and left on the floor, and he finds a way to make his wings. And it is such a funny scene where he has his bathrobe on, and then because it's got long sleeves, and he makes, I guess, a makeshift version of his technology that helps him fly, he escapes the old age home. The scenes of him, Spider-Man in action, are so much fun, the way John Romita lays it out. If you love Spider-Man, I feel like the Roger Stern stuff will really hit home. It's near the beginning of his run on Amazing. He had been on Spectacular prior to.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, he had a run on Spectacular as well. So some of the things he does in Spectacular Spider-Man feed into what takes place in Amazing, but he had a soft spot for the Vulture. I heard him on podcasts in the past where he just really liked that character and wanted to use him in a way that made him, gave him a little bit more weightiness as a villain. Like he could be a real problem for Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And he kind of showcased it in his run a couple times.
And it's just perfect, isn't it, John Romita Jr.? Like very much continuing the feel of his dad's work from the 60s,
right?
But feeling more modern. So it kind of had that nice, happy. I think that was a really happy medium. And that was some of J.R. Jr.'s best.
I feel so, yeah. From myself, I love that era of JR. So I'll start there with a oldie but a goodie, Amazing Spider-Man 224. You can find it in bunch of different places, but the best place is this, Omni.
It's an
This is
amazing
the one I was
collection.
referring to you
I
before.
thought you
This is
were.
the one we can't part ways with this. This is just an amazing collection.
There is a Spider-Man reading order from 1984 to 1985 on the Omniverse Comics
Very
Guide.
cool.
It covers 2 years. It's the year of Secret Wars upwards. So you get just before the Secret Wars, and then if the first period of time of him in his alien costume. Okay.
Very cool.
I'm going to choose for my second tonight one of the most obvious choices. And I was going to do it last, but I where I'm doing this autobiographically, it was a story I read early on, but not so early. Because I think when we've talked about this story previously, we've always said, as great a Spider-Man story as this is, don't read it first, because it's not your standard Spider-Man. Originally, it was called Fearful Symmetry. It's now predominantly known as Kraven's Last Hunt. It covers Web of Spider-Man 31 to 32, Amazing Spider-Man 293 to 294, and Peter Parker, The Spectacular Spider-Man 131 to 132. That incredibly long title, Peter Parker, The Spectacular Spider-Man. They just feel like how long they could make it. Who knows?
Should have put his address there too.
43 Acacia Road. So it came out in 1987. Now, when you think 12, 13 years earlier, they changed the comic code to allow for certain kinds of crime stories and to allow for horror stories. And certain topics were back on the table. And then just over a decade later, we get one of the darkest Spider-Man stories we'll ever see. Like, it's incredibly dark. It's psychological. It's all about one of his lamest villains, let's face it. Kraven was kind of a bit of an odd character. His whole shtick is that he was going to hunt Spider-Man, and he never managed to capture him successfully. But in this story, it opens up with him shooting Spider-Man. Spider-Man's dead, so Kraven doesn't just kill Spider-Man and bury him. He takes his place, and he becomes the new Spider-Man. And it just gets darker and weirder from there. The streets are being terrorized by a character who writer James DeMatteis is a huge fan of. I think he created him, actually. Vermin, who comes up in a lot of his Spidey stories.
Yeah.
So he's kind of the villain of the piece on top, because like that's who Kraven's hunting now as Spider-Man. He doesn't have any webbing, and he's just dressed in the black costume, running about. He gets spotted by his new wife, Mary Jane, who realizes that's not Spider-Man. I don't want to say too much more than that, but it's, as an ending, it's incredibly dark. And when you think about the fact that this was a kid's comic for all intents and purposes. This is a kid's comic. And the theme of this comic is so dark and so stark. You know, it's not a cheery ending at all.
No.
And things also, this was a time when these kind of things happen, this stayed that way until it was 2010 when we saw Kraven again. If you've read the story, I recommend just reading the story. The reading order is very, very simple. You can find the reading order on omniversecomics.guide, but also the Fallout section will tell you the other stories that it influenced. So go and have a look at that, but don't read the guide. I've written a guide, but don't read it. Go read the story. It's one of the greatest Spider-Man stories you read, but hopefully you've read some other Spidey stories first. This is an absolute gem, and I think even though it's coming up for nearly 40 years old now, so it came out in 1987, it's aged incredibly well. Really, really well. Yeah. So yeah, by James DeMatteis, the art's by Mike Zeck, who he defined Spider-Man for me. He was my first Spider-Man artist, not counting all the various Spider-Man cartoons I used to watch as a kid. But I found this book in trade paperback format quite early on. So after I'd started reading single issues, Marvel really started pushing trade paperbacks and collected editions. But, you know, not massively, not the way they do today, but all those key stories were collected. And I picked this up in hardback format. On the front cover, it was Spider-Man upside down, like on a window, so you can see that his fingers are pressed on the glass and the rain is running down through where his fingers are placed. And it was just such a simple cover, but an incredibly cool cover. I've loved this story from day one, and I will love it for all time. Go back and read it. It's timeless.
Okay, my number 2, the Tom DeFalco, Ron Frenz era, issue 258.
Oh,
I love the cover of this issue. This is included now in the Alien Costume Saga Omnibus.
Yeah.
These issues. But it hasn't been released in any epics yet. There's a whole section of Spider-Man that hasn't been collected, except for here. I have
Oh
it
my
in
god,
this
I had
original
that.
trade.
I had that trade
Yeah,
paperback.
I found this a few years ago at a comic shop, and I was just like, "Whoa, what's this?" And I wasn't. And then I looked at the creative team, and at the back they have the covers. This was a kind of rare thing back then.
Yeah.
They didn't make too many of these.
No,
So the issue that I've picked is this one right here.
that cover is incredible.
That cover's so cool. I remember them including it in the Spider-Man animated series in the 90s.
Ah, what they did a scene that
I
looked like,
remember
yeah.
they did a scene where they had that cover that moment. So I'm like, wow, that's the cover that influenced that. So that's really cool. I love this era of Spider-Man as a whole. The Friends of the Falco era is a lot of fun. Great way to continue or build off of what Roger Stern had done. It doesn't feel like too jarring and shocking. It still it flows very nicely and complementary to each other. This is a great issue because it not only gets into the psychological aspect of what the symbiote costume is doing to Peter, it finds him at the crux of his life where he's this lucky son of a bitch is deciding between Mary Jane and Black Cat, right? With all the problem Peter
And
has,
he made
the
the
one
wrong
problem he
choice.
doesn't, yeah, the one problem he doesn't seem to have is the ladies department.
Yeah.
He also has those blonde bombshells that live on the top
Oh
penthouse of his
yeah, with the
Chelsea
rhyming
apartment who
names.
like to sunbathe all the time and ask him for company. There's a moment where he's asked to stay, can you keep me company while the sun goes down? And then the next scene is 45 minutes later, he goes swinging as Spider-Man. I'm like, gee, I wonder what happened.
They did
Getting
it
back to the
6 times.
symbiote, it's him realizing that this thing is really starting to affect him completely. It's consuming him and it's alive. So it's the famous issue where he goes to the Baxter building and asks for the help from the Fantastic Four to figure out what this thing that came from Secret Wars with them, because they were there, they
Yeah.
know where it's from. And of course Reed Richards is very excited to do some experiments, and I just like to study that a little bit more. So you find out that what its weakness potentially is. And it is the one time that Spider-Man wears a very interesting costume
Mm-hmm.
that is sometimes cosplayed at Comic Cons and such. It's that perfect blend of the seriousness, the drama, and the humor that comes along with a Spider-Man story. Like there's some genuine funny moments here, but there's also some genuine soap opera drama,
Mm-hmm.
as well as the horror aspect of this suit being alive and tormenting him. So it checks off all the boxes. It's got a great cover. I love Friends in the Falco run as much as, any other part of the 80s. All right,
Woohoo!
Dave, you're number 3.
Okay, my number 3 in top 10 80s Spider-Man comics episode is in this X-Men omnibus. Whoa, that's right, kids.
What?
Whoa. It's Marvel Fanfare numbers 1 to 2. I think they're about to release the Marvel Fanfare omnibus, aren't they? Written by Chris Claremont. The art is by Michael Golden. All the art. He does the pencils, inks, and colours. It's almost like Claremont's just gone, so what do you want to draw? And he's gone, I want dinosaurs. I want to mutate some of the characters. Here's a little clue as to what happens. Quite a big clue, actually. But yeah, that is one of my first Spider-Man figures I got as an adult. Again, it was from a trade paperback. So years after the issues came out, they released this book as X-Men Savage Land. And it was the X-Men stories from the first 4 issues of Marvel Fanfare. In this one, it's Spider-Man and the Angel teaming up. It's Peter Parker is sent as photographer to the Savage Land, where this lady is very intent on getting her boyfriend back. And it's Carl Lycos, who is Sauron. Who's an X-Men villain who was lost to the Savage Land some time ago. So she's looking out for him. She convinces Angel to take her to the Savage Land for this expedition to find him. And so if you don't know, the Savage Land is a place in the Marvel Universe where prehistoric times are still continuing. So there's they're full people who are kind of like cave people. Kazar is a modern man living there as a sort of Tarzan type English guy living in the jungle with a pet saber-toothed tiger. He's also in the story. It's one of the most random elements of the Marvel Universe. So yeah, there's a place in the Marvel Universe, right, where dinosaurs are sitting around. Really? Yeah, why not? So it's a very odd thing. But yes, this is a really cool story. And when they get to the end of issue 1, there's a big change for Angel and Spider-Man. It's a bit of a screw it moment for Peter Parker, where he's kind of like, he's just given up on trying to hide his secret identity. It's very clear to everyone present, he's Spider-Man, mate. He's Spider-Man. But they track down the villains, and the villains in it are Zaladane, who is Lorna Dane's evil sister, and the Savage Land Mutates, who are always a bit sort of oddball villains. You know, it's like, what's their shtick? Do they just kind of hang around there and wait for a really bad guy to come and lead them into doing something? How does this work? And they've built this machine. Like, what are they going to... Are we going to reverse people's evolution? Like, why? And it doesn't matter. It wasn't... It's not even until now. I read this again for, like, what, the 5th, 6th, 7th time the other day. And it's only now that I'm going, but why were they doing it? I don't honestly have an answer. But it doesn't matter because it's just such a fun story.
Matter.
It's 2 issues. It's beautifully illustrated by Michael Golden. He was doing hyper detailed stuff before a lot of other people were doing hyper detail. He's like pre Arthur Adams. He's definitely pre Todd McFarlane, and he was a big influence on a lot of those creators. His art style is something else. Especially on this title. So the Marvel Fanfare, I believe, was released in a prestige format. So it had nicer paper, so they could print these very nice, high-quality images. Whereas comics otherwise were on newsstand print, and it was not the best print quality. So this allowed us to really see what his art looked like. It was released in 1982, and again, despite the fact that is quite a long time ago now, 43 years, still great. Still stands. It's still goddamn fun. And it's just a great little Spider-Man outing. And it's one that most people miss because it was in Marvel Fanfare and not in the main titles.
Everyone in the chats are saying that they're sold because they're looking up Golden's art. Omega Bread said, just looked it up and the art is gorgeous. Shower me with all the golden goodness. So there you go.
That's filth. Why don't we hold hands and take a stroll through the lanes of what's old to the Omniverse? These are our top 5 most watched videos. At number 5, Top 10 Ed Brubaker. At number 4, Collector's Item Special with Xander Cannon. Number 3, Breaking Down Crisis on Infinite Earths. At number 2, New Manga Spotlight. What is Love? And at number 1, Top 10 Image Comics of all time.
Anything else, Dave?
No.
Okay.
It's you, sir.
I haven't picked any story arcs with
I
this
know.
one. I'm usually
so far you're on one-off issues, which is nice, though.
Usually
I
I'm
like it.
So my first pick is the entire Roger Stern omnibus. So Dave, you can't pick any. I'm going to pick something.
Yeah.
From
It's good to pick something.
epic collection. That is the Ghosts of the Past. This is the mostly Ron Friends and DeFalco stuff, but included, what I like about these epics is that they include the stories you need to read along with what's going on. So in this one, we've got a couple of annuals, which are really nice.
Yeah.
Web of Spider-Man #1.
Oh, yeah.
And issues 259 to 272. So this picks up where this trade leaves off.
Yeah, very much
This one
so.
picks up directly from it. Or if you have the Alien Saga, Alien Costume Saga, this would be the next group of issues to read. But the one I'm picking here is not a little bit.
A little bit.
It does overlap a little bit. You're correct. Yes. So you will have doubles, but you'll be completely buttoned up. With that being said, my pick is from issue 267 of Amazing Spider-Man. It's a Peter David story with Bob McLeod on art. The Commuter Cometh.
Oh.
This is another classic cover for I think. Like when you see it, it's like I know that story or I know that issue. And what's fun about it again is it's the humorous side of the Peter Parker character of the Spider-Man stories where he goes in, he finds himself being a little bit overzealous trying to stop a criminal, a thief, where he tracks him all the way into the suburbs. And of course what ensues is a lot of humorous hijinks because Spider-Man is very much, what you realize is Spider-Man is very much a character who needs to be in a city.
Yeah.
If he's not in a city, he's a little ineffectual.
trust
And this
Peter
story
David to come
really,
up with this idea.
yeah, and it's such a unique story because it's like, yeah, that would kind of be what would happen. And it was adapted a little bit in the Homecoming movie, where Spider-Man finds himself at a few, or Peter finds himself at a few parties in the suburbs, and he changes into a spider outfit, realizing there's nothing for him to swing from,
Uh-huh. Good
and he looks
shout.
like a real goofball. Yeah. So this issue is this issue is the one that inspired that whole sequence in the movie of Peter being in the suburbs trying to be Spider-Man and being a total loser about it. Not a loser, but out of his depth.
Yeah.
Right? You're not Spider-Man here.
Uh-huh.
There's just trees and a few houses, and you do not belong, sir. And the neighborhood, you are not friendly to this neighborhood, right?
You do
So
not belong, sir.
you do not belong here, sir. But nonetheless, it's a fun issue. It's true to the character of Spider-Man in his world, but it is a bit more on the lighter side. So
Yeah.
check it out. It's a good one from the 80s. Peter David.
I am going to pick a Peter David story. And again,
Yeah,
this
do
was
it.
part of my growing up and getting into Spider-Man thing back in those trades in the day. So the trade paperbacks were great for getting into those old stories and finding the key stories where Spider-Man was really impacted by stuff. This story was written by him, as obviously, as I have said so. It's drawn by Rich Buckler. The ink's Brett Breeding. Colors are Bob Sharon. Bob Sharon seems to color pretty much every Spider-Man story from the 80s as well, which is nuts. It's Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man, 107 to 110. Now, I didn't get the significance of this when I first read it. So from an autobiographical point of view, it's like I read it going like, yeah, this is a good story. But I didn't really realize the impact because actually it affects one of his support cast from Marvel Team Up. And I didn't get hold of those issues till after that. I got hold of quite a few issues of Marvel Team Up. And one of the support characters in there was a police officer called Jean DeWolf. It's quite a grim one. This is a very serious Spider-Man story. The villain is the Sin Eater. He's not actually powered. It's based on the Son of Sam to a degree. So he's going around and killing people he doesn't feel are bringing people to justice or obstructing justice. And Spider-Man's trying to get hold of this guy who's just going around with a shotgun murdering people. This also is a big turning point for Peter Parker and his relationship with Matt Murdock. So this is the period of time when their identities become clear to each other. I was trying to say it without spoiling it, and like you can't. This is when they do find out, who each other really are.
Yeah,
which is
that's
quite
an important relationship.
really key relationship. Yeah, because it does change their relationship from this point going forward.
Yeah,
it's a great story. Like I say, it's surprisingly dark for a Spider-Man story, not on the same level that Kraven's Last Hunt is, but it's still quite gritty, street level. It's not really about superpowers in terms of his foes. It's just about stopping this person who is at one point even shooting into crowds. But I think if you've been reading Spider-Man for quite a long time, this was probably a shocking moment. Those opening couple of pages when it's very unceremoniously took out one of his support characters. Not a big build-up, not a warning on the cover. Well, I think there was sort of a warning on the cover, because it's quite a bland cover, though, to be fair. Well, it's Spider-Man just swinging at you on the front cover, and I think it's got some big word balloons. But not what you're expecting from this story. And it's a shocker. In a good way.
It's a good one. It's a key story in Spider-Man's mythology. Okay, what are we on now? 4? I'm switching books from Amazing, and I'm going over to Spectacular.
Ooh.
Hot take. This is a hot take from me. Amazing was appropriately titled. It was an amazing book during the 80s, right?
Yeah.
And then you get into the Michelini and McFarlane stuff, and it's just mind-blowing artistically. I just didn't feel the story was as strong in the Amazing books as they were in Spectacular. Jerry Conway and Sal Buscema get onto the book, and I didn't realize how much Spectacular Spider-Man Sal Buscema had drawn.
Yeah,
he was on that book for quite a while.
Yeah, he really was.
And at this point, I really appreciated his artwork and his art style of pacing the story, and instead of it being so much of a like the design that Todd McFarlane had, which was incredible, this was very story driven, and the issues I'm talking about are collected here, which unfortunately it came out with Tombstone and then a #1, and they never completed the set, unfortunately, because it's a really, really strong story. It's got some silliness to it, but also there's the seriousness of Tombstone as a villain. I guess he was the response to a new villain on the Spectacular book. Amazing had Venom, but this guy was a serial killer who was a gun for hire for the mob, and he had it out for Robbie Robertson. They had a history together, and Robbie was legitimately terrified. What I liked about Spectacular is it really started to include all of the characters within the Daily Bugle, and the more personal aspects of Peter's life were really being explored a little bit slower. But that collection specifically, issues 137 to 150, also Annual 8,
Okay.
which is the Gwen Stacy, I think Gwen Stacy
the
returns.
Evolutionary War tie-in.
Yes, the Evolutionary War issue is tied into this. The one thing that I remember when I had spoken to Jerry Conway about this particular time on Spider-Man was that he was not a fan of having to cross over with Inferno. Because he's like, I had a story that I was doing, and then I had to go into Inferno, and I had to write something. And I don't think his stories were bad myself. That thing of, I wonder what it would have been like if writers would have been just left alone. But either way, this run of Jerry Conway's Spider-Man storytelling, because of course he's famously known for taking over the mantle after Stan left and death of Jean Grey and et cetera, many characters he created. But this one, so Punisher is heavily featured.
Yeah.
The Tarantula makes an appearance.
Yeah.
For a storyline, which was very interesting. It was about deporting immigrants. Funny enough, which is very
now it's topical.
Pointed, very topical. And again, the drama between Robbie and Tombstone, he affects Robbie's life quite significantly.
He does
in this book,
yes.
Which is I don't want to give anything away. Just and the way this trade ends, it's real cliffhanger. And I wish they would have picked it up and collected it somehow. So I'm hoping that this is collected.
It's not that long
somewhere.
ago it came out, though, was it? That trade?
It's been a couple years.
Was it?
Yeah, it doesn't seem like there's any commitment to putting out. And
I think it's because they're switching to Epics. Maybe
Epics were around.
They were.
But
yeah,
you're right. Spectacular wasn't included back then.
Yeah.
Anyways,
that is a really interesting choice.
I really enjoyed rereading it. It was probably some of my favorite stuff of that time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the Spectacular Spider-Man run from when Jerry Conway comes on to when JMD takes over. It's a great time for the book. Nice. All right. Bring it on home, Dave.
Unexpected. Okay. I'm going to give a sort of honorary mention to one storyline, although I don't know if it's on your list, and I really hope it's not, and I'm spoiling it. The Juggernaut. Okay. So if anyone's going, why aren't you mentioning the Juggernaut 2-part story? We have actually talked about it in our Bring on the Bad Guys Spider-Man episode. In terms of the theme and it being autobiographical, that would be perfect for this because it actually played a part in how I dealt with a real-life bully. But if you want to find out what that story is, go back and watch our Bring on the Bad Guys Spider-Man episode where we look at 10 Spider-Man villains and some of their greatest stories. My actual final choice, though, is, and I will say as well, I was very tempted to go for all annuals tonight just for the novelty of it. But this is an annual. It's Amazing Spider-Man Annual number 15, written by Denny O'Neil, the arts by Frank Miller, Klaus Janson, colour by Bob Sharon, as always. And it features the Punisher, Spider-Man, and Dr. Octopus in one storyline. And it's quite tongue-in-cheek. I mean, it's the Punisher, so it's got some quite dark elements. But it's all about people vying for the front page headline. At one point, even Peter Parker phones up because I've got the headline for today's edition. Events happen very, very quickly over the course of 24 hours or less because they're all trying to get in there. What was it like? I think it's the 12th of September, 1981. It's dated, as you can see, when this came out in the story. But it's a Punisher story. And this is when Punisher he'd made a few appearances elsewhere. If you are looking for a Punisher reading order as well, we got you. You can jump on and find the first 15 years worth of Punisher stories in order at Omniverse Comics Guide. This is great stuff. It's how many pages? Like 40 pages. And it opens up with like this J. Jonah Jameson wants to run yet another Spider-Man threat or menace front page, even though he's warned that the sales drop every time he does it. I wonder if that was an influence on Amazing Spider-Man 300. Huh? Do you reckon?
Perhaps,
Maybe.
perhaps.
Speaking of, actually, big props to Marvel Man, who mentioned that the Sin Eater story from earlier did influence the debut of Venom. So it's one of the big knock-on effects of that story is Venom's first appearance. Excellent. Thanks for the reminder. I forgot to mention it. Good shout. But yeah, so this starts off with a stage magician making out that he's killed somebody and then he's going to bring them back from death. But the Punisher shoots him, so he can't bring them back. And it's all about them trying to save this person's life. And it's very fast-paced. It looks great. This was some of Miller's strongest artwork. That cover is fantastic. With that, just even like
I've ever read this.
Bold red at the back of it coming through, and that newspaper cover, and it's held by Dr. Octopus' arms, and it's just such a cool cover. And the Punisher's shooting at Spider-Man on that smaller image on the front page. It's brilliant. It's brilliant stuff. And this was there was a point in the 90s when people would go, annuals were crap. And I go, no, in the 90s, annuals were crap. They turned them into just crossover events, like mini, or sometimes massive, like 14-part crossover events. And it was a big expectation on people to have to buy events of that size within the space of a couple of months. And they often weren't very good. But in the 80s, they were quite special. And sometimes you'd get a guest
Spider-Man's
artist
annuals were very good.
There were some brilliant Spider-Man annuals, yeah. And there is a major
some real
key event.
Important issues.
Exactly. Yeah. So this is the one I've chosen.
Appearances.
Yeah. For his first appearances, major events, major turning points, they mattered. In the 90s, less so. So yeah, go back. If you hit an annual during an 80s run, don't skip it. There's some great stuff in there. And this is a key one. And it's Denny O'Neil. Denny O'Neil and Frank Miller together on a title. Like, don't skip that.
Dream team.
It is. Completely. Yeah.
Honorable mentions. It's important to note, like, we didn't list some obvious ones, and it's not because we don't recognize them as great. The Hobgoblin saga, amazing stuff. The Juggernaut storyline that you mentioned. I had a soft spot as well for the Black Cat storyline that follows, or that preludes that Juggernaut story. It was like a 4-issue or a couple issues with her and Peter, something like that. Good. I enjoyed that a lot. We didn't mention Spider-Man 300. Obviously, Amazing Spider-Man 300 is a key.
Yeah,
book,
I did think you might, but
I just felt like those books will come.
Those books.
We're going to talk about them down the line, right? I want to throw a couple curveballs and good reads.
Yeah.
Not that any of those aren't. But my final pick for tonight is controversial, but I think a classic. My fifth creator is going to be Jim Owsley and Mark D. Bright for the Spider-Man Wolverine issue.
Oh, lovely.
I know this has some controversy behind it because of what happens to one of the key characters in Spider-Man's world, but as a standalone issue, it is a very well-made comic. You've got two of the biggest, most popular characters of that time teaming up, I think, for the first time together, like sharing a story specifically made for them.
They've been in Marvel Team Up together, and a couple of times, but yeah. The way they did it with the special one-shot was very unusual.
Yeah, this was a very special issue. No, and I remember as a kid, my older cousin who got me into comics, he had this hanging up on a mantle, literally. He said that no one can touch that comic. It's the the most important comic I own. So I never read it. Until today.
Oh.
Today was the first time I ever read it. I own the actual hard copy issue, but that's put away in a long box.
Which one?
We're not supposed to touch that.
Because they did it. There was the original. Because they did a version as well. They did it as like a bookshelf edition, but it was reprinted on nicer paper. So
yeah, no, this was the
original one. That's when I first read it. Yeah.
Yeah. I reread it, or I read it for the first time today in the Epic Collection, Kraven's Last Hunt. It's collected there, which is really nice. It's included in that series because the story feeds into the main storyline that's going
massively.
On. But this is Spider-Man and Wolverine in Europe. Peter Parker's on an assignment with Ned Leeds. Wolverine reconnects with an old flame, which is, you're learning things about Wolverine's history here. Spider-Man is featured in the black suit and in the red and blue suit. It's got everything you want, a good fight between the main characters. It's a really good comic, well written, beautifully drawn. Check it out.
Yeah.
You won't be disappointed if you are a fan of Spider-Man or Wolverine. It's one of both of their great stories,
Yeah.
I would say. There's a lot to pick with this one.
There is a lot to
maybe we'll
pick.
do a part 2.
We could easily do a part 3. There's so much 80s Spider-Man goodness.
Yes. Thank you, everybody, for joining us live on Twitch.
Thank you.
And watching us on YouTube and listening to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. We love everybody. Don't forget to visit us at omniversecomics.guide for where we got some reading orders for some of the things that we actually listed today. It'll help you along in your reading. It'll make it more enjoyable, and it'll tell you what to read, what to skip, all that good stuff. And, of course, all our podcasts are there.
Truth.
Dave,
yes,
as always, it's a pleasure.
Thank you. And likewise, sir. Oh, and also, you people watching or listening, feel free to drop your favorite 5 that you would have included on your list in the comments. Oh, I remembered this time.